So, The Hollow Hills is book two in Mary Stewart's Merlin trilogy, and it is something special. In it, we're sort of treated to Merlin's journey from this youthful polymath into the proper magician that he is, right? As he sort of shepherds a young Arthur on his path toward kingship. Um, it is, to put it bluntly, a wild ride, and arguably my favorite book in the series. Stewart is, as I've said before, just an incredible author, and able to blend this sophistication and simplicity into her work, where you always know what's going on at any given time, and you're basically you're in it. You know what the world smells like, feels like, tastes like. You're living it for the most part. And she did her research, right? A lot of it. From the people of the Hollow Hills, the stories of the king under the world, the Welsh hill folk, right? Who Merlin deals with. And just all the Arthurian weirdness just in general. There's so much to love for a history and mythology nerd like myself. It's as if Stewart always has a neat trick up her sleeve, a new legend to interpret. Some things even I didn't know about until you read her little notes at the back of the book where she explains, oh, this thing that happened in the book was actually an obscure legend from a Welsh myth or whatever. It's really quite amazing, right? Merlin throughout this book is just working wheels within wheels and plotting all sorts of crazy, impressive feats, right? He's been put in charge of the newborn baby Arthur, as King Uther wants nothing to do with him. This illegitimate spawn, right? Uther means to have a true-born heir to the throne. So Merlin's looking out for Arthur, having him raised first in Les Britain under the tutelage of an old nurse, and then later on in Britain, right under everybody's nose. Uh, Disguised as a ward of Count Ector of Galava, who is the father of Sir Kay. Some say Kai, I know, and who's also the foster father of Bedivere, at least according to Mary Stewart. And I'll give you three guesses how Mary Stewart decides to spell that name, but that'd be mean, come to think of it. Uh, Bedivere, at you'll be interested to know, sort of serves as, I guess, as a little bit of a spoiler, but it's King Arthur. Bedivere in this sort of fills the role of Sir Lancelot, actually, being Arthur's like friend and confidant, and being like this great knight whose skill is unrivaled. And Stewart actually explains in her notes how she decided that uh, that she wouldn't include Lancelot because Lancelot is a French invention from much later, long, long, long after the quote unquote original Arthurian legend. Uh, at least as far as Lancelot came about quite a bit after people were already telling stories about Arthur. So, for the most part, the original stories follow kind of Arthur and Bedivere, sometimes Guinevere, and sometimes Merlin. Although she admits herself that Merlin is a somewhat mysterious figure as far as the history goes. In the end, I just don't think she likes Lancelot all that much, which is fine. I mean, who can blame her, really? My own personal guilty pleasure is authors who go out of their way to screw over Sir Lancelot in increasingly creative ways. As I'm not that big of a fan of him either, and there's something hilariously rich about it, about the decision to cut out Lancelot entirely, or make him a villain, as I've seen before, or whatever. Um, yeah, and that's nothing against you. Say if Lancelot is your favorite character, you do you. My favorite knight is Gawain, who in most cases is the worst knight. So I digress. Arthur is brought up in the Hollow Hills as a squire. He's tutored in the ways of war and in the ways of courtesy by Count Ector, and in the meantime, Merlin is investigating these various rumors and legends about Maskin, who we as historians know as Emperor Maximus of Rome. Uh, and of course, Mary Stewart is following the history of the kings of Britain's account of Maximus, who married the Princess Ellen of Wales. She also follows the Mabinogians account, right? The famous poem, "The Dream of Maskin." I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last name because I know I'll butcher it, and I have too much respect for Wales to do that. So, yeah, Maskin apparently had this really cool sword. And after he died, some of his people brought it back to Britain and hid it in a temple of Mithras. Mithras, okay? Anytime Mithras comes up in a story, I'm tickled because very few people uh, really remember Mithras as a character. Everyone talks about the Greek gods and the Egyptian gods. Nobody talks about weird proto Jesus, the bullfighter. But Merlin goes to this temple and he finds the great sword of Britain. Right? He also finds a certain Celtic grail, although he leaves that for someone else to find. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. uh, he takes the sword to an island and he hides it in a cave where supposedly dwells the spirits of the other world, and of the Hollow Hills themselves. In this cave, over the years, water begins to drip down upon the sword, and it forms this sort of hard crust of lime and wetness and stone that when Arthur goes exploring as a young man, eventually finds the sword, he has to break the sword free and pull it from the stone. This, at Merlin's behest, is then kept hidden, and they place the sword in the Perilous Chapel, the chapel perilous, if you will, where it okay, sorry. Allow me to check my notes. It is, yes, wreathed in dancing white flame that burns anyone who touches it. Remember in the first book how I was talking about the ambiguity of magic and how, it might just be parlor tricks and stuff? Yeah, that's not really what's happening right here with the white fire and all that. Um, but then it's go time because King Uther, having failed the sire any new children, has taken ill. That doesn't stop him, however, from marching against the invading Saxons. So Ector takes Arthur and the other kids to the battle, and Merlin joins them, and he sits by and watches as Arthur is placed right beside the king in formation, And during the battle, Arthur is disarmed by a Saxon, and Uther is thrown to the ground. Uther, injured and weak as he is, he grabs his sword and throws it to Arthur, uh, and everyone starts cheering as Arthur leads them on to victory. And I mean, everyone knows who that kid is now, right? They look at him and they see Uther in his youth, right? Wielding the great sword, and everyone's cheering and happy. And Merlin goes off, and he's like wheeling and dealing, and it's like this tremendous, monumentous occasion. Only he loses track of Arthur. In order to find him, Merlin uses magic to try and scry the young man's location. And after the battle, Arthur is found with his half sister, Morgause, in bed together because no one thought to tell Arthur who he was yet. Morgause knows, but she's an evil Cersei Lannister who and doesn't care about any of that. She's ew. Mary Stewart, without writing anything particularly lewd or crass, and never failing to remain prim and proper as she writes, is still able to evoke this sense of something obscene and terrifying, followed swiftly by Morgause being chased off and threatened by Merlin, an enraged Merlin, or about as enraged as he can get, and Arthur being told who he is, this horrifying realization after everything, and then Arthur is crowned king as all the lords gather together at the Perilous Chapel. And Arthur, once again, draws the sword, and it is this wondrous, conflicted, terrible, and beautiful end to the Hollow Hills. It this promise of this great king and the threat of Morgause, the Witch Queen, and her bastard son, begot of incest, right? Mordred, who is destined to kill his uncle father Arthur. I mean, my good God, it is well done, and Mary Stewart is just such a tremendous writer. It's a great book. Yeah, wonderful. Um, so, bye.